Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, The Essential Guide to Visual Content Marketing, offering a deep dive into content strategy and actionable tips for your marketing and content pros today. Today we'll cover the things to know about DAM-powered visual content marketing trends and tips to give your marketing more horsepower. I'm Jake Athey, the Director of Marketing with Widen, along with our very special guest today, Peg Miller of the B2B Marketing Academy. Hi, Peg. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Peg Miller. As Jake said, I'm with the B2B Marketing Academy. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I've spent the last 20 years spending my time helping B2B marketers really hone their craft. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today.
All right, yes, thanks for being here with us today, Peg. Now, our goal for all of you today is to really explore how you can take better advantage of the growing visual content trends and offer a solid content strategy with actionable tips for making the most of your content technologies and tools. So 3 takeaways that we have for you today include to be sure to have a strategy that involves your marketing and creative teams working together, and that's very key. We want you to think about people and processes before tools and technology. There's certainly a time and place for that. And then to also put mechanisms in place to measure and realize the value of your visual content to your marketing operations across the content lifecycle. Now, to be sure we're talking about the same thing when we reference visual content. Just what is visual content, you may ask? Well, we'll define it as it's not just images and videos, documents, and creative files, the things that you're all working with every day, but visual content carries messaging and context with an intent to inform or influence a particular action or reaction. Now, we're in this incredibly awesome time where we can do so much with visual content to build a stronger connection with our audience, whatever that may be. And here's a representation of some of the top visual content types today, going way beyond just photos or artwork to accompany a long-form text piece to carry much more meaning and connection to your audience instantly and more long-term lasting impact to your business. So your business may utilize a mix of rich content types, such as interactive infographics or mini graphics, ebooks, and interactive white papers to convey complex concepts and research today. We've seen the growing trend with data visualizations, graphical data displays, quizzes, and visual puzzles that offer a great way to engage with data. And then there's screenshots, tutorials, question and answer visuals. They're very helpful ways to inform. Of course, we all love those memes and comics or quote cards that make for some great social fodder. And then 360-degree images for e-commerce channels, animated GIFs for your email marketing, and cinemagraphs for blog posts that make for some really compelling call to actions following that instant impact. And then, of course, we're spoiled to be in this incredible time for television, but an even better time for branded content to include short-form stories, feature films and documentaries, video and podcast series. Who doesn't love a good podcast series? And those oh-so-snackable short-form video clips in your Facebook feed with no audio required. So as marketers today, we have all of these big content opportunities to deploy different content types for different brand channels and audiences to really tell our story and influence action. But of course, this time is welcomed with big content problems, which go way beyond the fact that your teams can't find, access, and share the content that they need when they need it every day. Of course, this lack of structure can lead to a lack of visibility among other key content creators and consumers, connectivity to other audiences that you want to reach, and a lack of measurement into what's working and what's not, and a lack of understanding into just how well you're doing as a content pro. Now, this can make for an abysmal way to work, and we've heard that over and over again. Now, here's what our friend Joe Polizzi of the Content Marketing Institute has to say about this. Enterprises have visual assets all over the organization. They are hard to find, challenging to access, and impossible to share. The time has come when enterprises need to treat visual assets like, well, assets. Couldn't have said it better myself. So, just what makes visual content digital assets? Well, digital assets are business assets if and when they are reusable for different groups and teams across your organization. They are repurposable for different types and purposes for all of those many lovely mechanisms and channels, and adaptable for different channels and devices, and trackable with alignment in your key performance indicators that drive your marketing forward. For this reason, DAM is mission critical today in dealing with the growth of visual content of all types in content operations, and not just marketing. Also from CMI, Chief Strategy Officer Advisor, Robert Rose, he had this to say, and it's as simple as this: the successful marketing approach of the future will depend heavily on a true enterprise competency to understand, develop, and execute smart digital asset management. So as content marketing strategies evolve and mature, the most successful teams have discovered the importance of mastering content marketing throughout their organization. Again, not just marketing, but throughout. And content strategy is the core of any high-functioning marketing team, and digital assets are the foundation of content. So today, most organizations have mastered the ability to link their digital asset, most digital assets seek to master the ability to link digital asset management with their public-facing content marketing strategy, providing the right content at the right time in the right format, easily consumed by future and current customers. So it's important for visual storytellers and content strategists to come together within an organization to build a comprehensive go-to-market content strategy. And perhaps most important is the creation, storage, organization, and retrieval of high volumes of supporting graphics, images, videos, and creative source files needed to execute these everyday marketing tactics, all while maintaining brand clarity, consistency, and control. So nearly every piece of content produced today, if it's done well, has at least one corresponding image, logo, or graphic, or video to help boost that interaction and performance. Now let's dive deeper into building a visual content marketing strategy with Peg.
Right, thanks Jake for setting that foundation for us, which is a great transition, because I want to challenge us today to think about using our DAM as the foundation of our content marketing strategy. I often see that organizations separate their DAM and separate their content marketing strategy from each other as two separate areas within the business. I'd like us to bring that together and let's use an analogy of if you were building a house. First of all, you'd need to lay the foundation, i.e. that's your DAM. It's where a lot of your content is residing, in the foundation, central repository for what you're going to be using. As you begin to layer on your content marketing strategy, i.e. you're building the blueprints, you're planning how you're going to build your house, how it's going to look, how, rooms that you want to have in that big garage and that man cave or whatever is important to you. It's important to then layer that on top of your DAM. Next, we're going to encourage you and show you ways of how to actually conduct a content inventory. This is basically taking stock of what materials you already have and what you need, looking for gaps and looking for areas that you're doing really well or having success, but also then filling in areas where we might be lacking with certain markets or certain strategies. And then finally we're going to actually go through some tips for the content execution, and I would liken this to, this is when you actually begin putting up your home, you're putting up the studs and putting up drywall, and you start to see, wow, my plan is coming together, and you're taking in information and basically modeling as you go. So we're gonna think about this as, like we say, the layers of building a house, going through our planning and our blueprint, really understanding what we have, what can we go forward with, and then making sure that the plan gets executed on point. So we're going to be sure that we fill this with some real-world examples for you and some practical tips that hopefully you can start using tomorrow. So really moving on to the next slide, there are actually 5 components that I'd like you to think about within your content marketing strategy. So those are plan, strategize, execute, and evaluate, and optimize. We're going to go through all of these in more detail and give you some specific examples of how you can bring DAM into assisting with this full circle strategy. And the details obviously are going to vary from company to company and industry to industry, but generally speaking, the content lifecycle process is going to follow most or all of these stages. And as you begin planning your content marketing strategy, it's really important to think through these stages and really identify the various teams and resources that might touch content at each of these stages. And as Jake mentioned, it's important to think about all areas of your business, not just the marketing team, but your creative team, and even outside of your building and the 4 walls of your organization into your influencer markets and other people who are helping amplify your content. So we'll touch on that as we move through today. Understanding all these sort of inflows and outflows are going to give you a more collaborative environment, and it's going to allow you to get the most out of current and future content creation efforts that you're doing. Typically, what I'm seeing is that most organizations have these activities happening in some way or another, and it's just time to bring them together in a more strategic way. So we're going to help you bring a little more formal strategy to this process. So getting started with your content plan really means that you need to understand your content niche and your opportunity. It's really important to clearly define where you are an expert, and do this very early in your content planning. Many of you have probably read Joe Pulizzi's book, Content Inc., where he talks about content tilt. And if you haven't read his book, I recommend that you do, or just go to one of his blogs where he talks about this. But really, or maybe you've been to CMW, but anyway, the point is, when you think about your content tilt, it's really defining your area of expertise very specifically. Keep asking precision questions until you really can say, yes, I own this space and I am an expert in this space, and really separate your brand from the competition. This is the content niche that you want to own, and you really need to back this up with visual representation too. In the planning stage, it's super important to make sure we identify the areas of the market that we do own currently and that we aspire to own. Maybe we have some thought leadership goals that we're going to execute against coming into this coming year, but let's be sure and get those articulated and understood throughout the organization. And of course, these are all going to fall from your general company goals and your overall business goals, which will then cascade into your marketing goals and will inform your content marketing goals. So just want to make sure we tie that all together. As we move into the strategy phase of this model, there's some key factors that I want you to consider when you're planning and documenting your strategy. First of all, you really need to start with the why and understand what business goals are we trying to achieve. Be sure that you write these down, including key dates and milestones that you need to hit or deliver within your market. As Jake mentioned early on in this conversation, we really want you to focus on people and process before making any big technology decisions. It's okay to do things manually for a while and work the kinks out. And it's actually much better to do that than to port a poor process into a new technology and not get full advantage of it. So I encourage people to take the time to really just understand your processes, get rid of things that aren't working, eliminate processes that no longer are relevant, and make sure that we setup process where we don't have it. For oftentimes when you go through this exploration process, you'll realize, oh, we don't have a good process for that part of our business, and it's a great time to just uncover that and fix it. And then the third thing to think about in our strategy is what I mentioned before. Really think beyond your own team and your own company and the walls and the payroll of your organization, and think about ways that you can leverage industry influencers or customers even who might help you come up with content ideas, help amplify content, or help share your story from a different viewpoint. Now I'm going to hand it back to Jake to talk a little bit about how DAM can help be that foundation of your content strategy.
Yes, thanks, Peg. So when you treat DAM as the engine or foundation to your content strategy, you should consider a number of ways that DAM can start to help with your content planning process. And a key tip is to make your content strategy, if you have one, or if you're creating one, your brand guidelines, and a content calendar, if you have one or if you're creating one, accessible from your DAM dashboard as your content command center, and treat it this way. And this helps to keep your strategy, plans, and content deliverables intact, so your teams have visibility into what's the strategy and what's the plan. And then you can also track ideas, requests, creative briefs, and project timelines along with your DAM and work management tools with some of the workflow tools that we're adding. And this helps to bring transparency and planning for your team and knowing what's out there by all of your content creators and consumers. And I know it's a little chicken or the egg, but you should look to use your content analytics and insights to inform a continuous process improvement of knowing what works to inform your next iteration of your plan. And we'll talk more about analytics and insights in just a bit. Back to Peg. Oh yeah, real quick, before we go back to Peg, we do want to have a poll today before we dive deeper into content strategy. Do you have a documented content strategy? And if you would, please answer this quick poll by select one of the following: yes, no, maybe.
So when we see these results come through, we're actually going to benchmark ourselves against the industry norm. So this could be fun.
Yes. All right. Looks like we're at 70%. Can we get 75? All right. We'll close the poll and go back to Peg.
All right. So I'm going to let those poll results tabulate in and set Jake up for a drum roll. But meanwhile, I'm going to give you a few ideas of what to actually include in your content marketing strategy and what you should be documenting. This is your chance, really, as we said, to set your brand apart and kind of develop a personality and a reputation using content themes that you've agreed upon, and further documenting things like voice and tone and on-brand images and graphic, and being really prescriptive about that with your team and other teams, and even freelance or influencer resources that you might work with. Ideally, this strategy document that we're building should really cascade from your business goals and from your overall marketing goals, and should work very much hand in hand with your branding guidelines document that you may already have. But here are some specific guidelines that I recommend you include in your content marketing strategy document, really based on what I'm seeing from other marketers who work in all kinds of industries. So first, let's get our business goals on paper. We want to make sure we have our content marketing strategy goals. Let's be specific about our content tilt. Literally, write down where we're going to own, what areas of expertise do we have, and what areas of the market we're going to own. I encourage people to be very specific about tone and voice, going as far to say we are, and then include adjectives that include descriptions of your brand and your tone and your voice, and then say we are not. And that way your team very clearly knows we are professional, we are credible, we are not casual, and I'm just throwing out examples here. But I don't think you can ever be too explicit in this document. I want to make sure that we get recommendations in there for proper image use and visual brand, and then recommendations for visual support of words on paper, if you will. So we want to make sure that we're both talking about the written content and the visual content that we cover. We want to make sure that we articulate and document any thought leadership goals or positioning goals that we have within our industry. And of course, we want to make sure that any audit or inventory information that we have collected about what we have already in place and our areas of gap that we're going to be filling are documented within our strategy document. And then, last but not least, make sure that we have our metrics that we're going to measure our success against. And we agree upon those before we start, and then we measure as we go. And of course, the content calendar. which is literally what we're going to do, who's going to do it, when, why, all of the above. So now I'd love to take a look at those poll results, and to amplify this, you know, we've mentioned Joe and Robert with CMI, and they do obviously an industry study every year and have found that nearly 70% of marketers do not have a documented content strategy. So how did we do today, Jake?
Yeah, well, we show that 32% do have a documented content marketing strategy, 56% do not, and the rest do not know. So pretty much consistent.
A little bit above average. There you go. Yeah. So I like to hear that.
Yeah, we thank everybody for taking our poll today.
Wonderful. So I think that just goes without saying that that's why we're here today, is to help you get some guardrails up so that as you're writing your strategy, you'll know how to execute and take your first steps. So let's move through and let's talk through some practical steps. Where to begin? So first of all, I recommend let's define the what. Jake's going to talk about this a little bit more, but setting the framework, it's very important to really understand what you already have in place and what you may be missing. I've yet to encounter a company that is not doing content marketing. Now, it may not be on strategy, it may not be organized, it may be happening in many different departments. All of those things are very common, but for a company to say we don't have content, I've honestly just never heard of that. So I challenge you to find it on those hard drives or hidden in wherever it is, sitting in a salesperson's briefcase. But we've got content out there floating around our organizations. And one of the ways you can do that, of course, is you can, inventory all of your public-facing content, but I also caution and remind organizations, be sure to look in those unpublished areas like your DAM system and network directories and hard drives and other areas where it's difficult to access. We want to pull that out of storage and make sure that we get that included in our inventory, because it could be very valuable to us somewhere down the line. And Serious Decisions estimates that up to 30% of content is unfindable within an organization. So I challenge you to just really continue to look for those hidden areas throughout published and unpublished content. Now I'm going to hand it back to Jake to actually walk through some specific steps when you conduct an audit.
Yeah, thanks, Peg. I've seemed to develop a bit of a passion for a content audit, and maybe it's because I like cleaning out our closets at home and uncovering those things that we purchased way back when and didn't realize we had. But getting to this, there are really 3 key steps to follow in any content audit. And we've distilled it down to this: to uncover, evaluate, and improve. And by following this framework of steps, there are a number of key questions to answer under each of these. And the first one with uncover is to uncover your inventory. What assets do you have? And then location. Where are those assets located? And access. Who has access to them and who should? And many of you have done this with your DAM projects, and you can leverage your DAM in this regard to see all that you have. Now, ideally, assets live centrally with your DAM as the single source of truth. But you can also see where assets are published online by looking at things like asset refer URLs with our insights and other tools that you can use to scrub the web for your content. You also want to be sure to look at roles and permissions holistically to see your asset and access controls. Now, under evaluate, you want to evaluate your brand. Are you presenting a consistent brand to the marketplace? You want to definitely evaluate messaging and consistency. Do the messages speak the language of your personas and audiences? And then buying stage or customer life cycle. Where does each piece fall in your sales funnel or buyer's journey, if you look at it that way, and your overall customer life cycle? And you can definitely use your DAM to help in evaluating consistency and messaging with a quick skim of your search results for specific collections or metadata criteria. And this is another opportunity to use and evaluate your metadata schema as well, and we can talk more about that. Under improve, you definitely want to identify your gaps. What content gaps do you have at each stage, and what gaps do you really need to fill? And then metrics. Peg talked about metrics. How often are your content assets viewed and shared, and then what's the next action to look at results? What actions have come as a result of that view or share? Now, once you track which content has been the most successful, of course, it's easier to replicate more successful content. And for your less successful pieces of content, identify what's missing, lacking, or off message to see if you can then upcycle or repurpose this content for better results. And your DAM can be really helpful in this process by using Insights content analytics for tracking engagement and to determine performance across like content. So we do have a little worksheet here that you can check out afterwards to help identify ways that your DAM can assist with your content audit. And you'll get this along with the webinar deck and recording to follow. Definitely take a look at this and let us know if you'd like help conducting a content audit with your DAM using this process. I'd love to help. In fact, I expect we'll conduct a workshop in the future that is all about applying DAM for content audits. So one thing to leave you with is to be sure that you schedule at least an annual content audit, if not quarterly or biannually, so that you're constantly honing and improving your content pool and making sure you have the right assets available for your content production processes. So moving on, back to Peg.
Great, that's very useful and practical advice, Jake. So now, as we move into step 2, we've talked about the what we have. Let's move on to the who we're trying to appeal to with our content. Remember, it's really important to take a customer-first approach to your content marketing strategy, and by that I simply mean thinking about your product or your service through the eyes of your customer versus, I know as marketers sometimes and representatives of a certain product, we tend to focus more on our features and we forget about the benefits and the who, the so what portion of that conversation. So really try to take an outside in approach with your customer. Thinking through the eyes of your customer. It's really important that we understand the journey and the buying process that our customers and our prospects are moving through. If you've developed personas in your organization, what I would recommend is that you really narrow it down to your top 3 most profitable personas and make those your first priorities from a content standpoint. If you haven't developed personas inside of your organization, or even if you have, you don't feel like you're using them very well, we're going to give you some tips on how to actually put that into action. So Jake's going to give us some examples of how other customers have used DAM in relation to their personas.
Yeah, DAM can really help with this phase of your strategy development, and you should embrace metadata fields for your content purposes. Fields like persona, localization criteria or region, and customer stage. And you should also look to use intended use or permitted uses as metadata fields to guide how your users are to use different content assets, and then track it with intended use. And this is really about treating DAM as your content hub, which leads more to the next step.
All right, so step 3, we've talked about the what we're doing and what we need. We've talked about the who we're targeting. Now let's think about the when, where, and the how of actually how, our execution phase, if you will. It's really important that we identify how will content get produced, i.e. what is our process, who's going to touch that, and how will it come to life? How does a content piece kick off? How do we identify what we're going to go after? And the when. What dates are we going to be publishing? With what frequency are we going to commit to? So put up those guardrails early and make sure that you get unilateral agreement across the organization. Another important component of this execution phase is where. And this is really your distribution channels. Where are you publishing to and through? And when I say that, you think of to might go to the web. Through might be through a sales team, through a partner channel, through influencers who are helping you distribute. So be sure to think of channels, omni-channel exposure for your content, both to your prospects and your customers. This is a very important stage in the process, the execution mode, and it's often where companies fall flat. One way that you can protect yourself from that is just make sure that you only commit to what you can continue to do. Take a crawl, walk, run approach, and maybe you have really aspirational goals for down the road, maybe 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but first of all, you need to cover the basics and get the fundamentals correct and make sure that whatever you're committing to, both inside the organization and out to your prospects and customers, that you can do on a regular basis. I'd like to also walk through with you some practical tips for building your content calendar. And these are really just gleaned from, experience working with various marketers, really getting started in content marketing, and some very important things to consider. Just make sure that you have your overall guidelines, any kind of industry themes, anchor dates, milestones that you're mapping against. If you have seasonality within your industry or your products, make sure that you factor that in. Any product launches coming on your horizon, get those tent stakes, if you will, set into the ground first. Then when you talk about the who is creating the content and the what channels, this is really about inventorying your current state, but also getting a little more aspirational and thinking about, okay, in the future or desired state, this is where we want to be. So you set your current plan, and you also put some aspirational goals in there for a future date. And of course, we need to think about omni-channel distribution, as I mentioned before, and the collaboration between different team members who will play a role. Be very specific when you're asking for something from somebody, especially when it's outside of your team or outside of your organization. People are very willing to help, but they need specific guidance from you so that they know how they can help you and what you need from them by what date. We're all very busy, and we're all certainly willing to do favors, but I found that you're able to get people to cooperate with you more the more specific you are with dates and very specific asks from them what you need. Also, let's not forget to be specific about dates. We want to make sure that we have assigned monthly, quarterly, and annual goals with editorial assignments if we have them. And I put this in air quotes, but beats of coverage. If you think about the old newspaper days where people had coverage areas or beats, let's make sure that people feel ownership for different topic areas that you're trying to own within your marketplace. And then certainly look for ways to use content that you currently have while you're identifying any gaps that you need to fill. So, and remember that both internal DAMs and any non-public facing content repositories are a great place to serve as the foundation for your audit. The other parting words I would leave you with: be thorough, but you don't have to be 100% perfect. This is a very much living document that you will continue to add to as you go. So now let's have Jake show us an example of how to use DAM in the foundation of building your content calendar.
Yeah, thanks, Peg. Yeah, you can really use DAM to help with the execution distribution of your content calendar a number of ways. For example, you can create collections for key themes and events on your content calendar, having that content readily accessible for what needs to be created and shared. You can use portals, our new portals functionality, to distribute assets to different teams of people responsible for the different distribution assignments. You want to set up mechanisms for intended use to be sure you track your content deliverables of how things are being used. And then leverage all of the structured data that you can from categories and collections, metadata, can't talk about that enough, and the governance controls for your inventories and your gap assessments. And these functions will help in making the most of your content calendar and creating some efficiencies for your teams there.
All right, we're moving to the fourth step in our process. We've talked about what, who, how, and when. Now we're in that evaluation mode, and we're really vetting out the why. So after we begin to execute upon our strategy, it's really important to evaluate how we're doing against our original goals. We want to evaluate our metrics to make sure we're measuring effectiveness of our content marketing programs. And again, these metrics are going to vary from company to company, and they're going to cascade from your overarching business strategies and goals within the organization, but some common metrics that you might want to consider. Let's move to the next one, Jake, and then we'll give people a pick list. These are some common metrics that I've seen from businesses all over the country and the world who, common metrics that we like to use in our content strategy, things that we can measure. And that can include everything from web metrics like unique visitors and click-throughs to our social shares and how much following we're building, engagement with content. Some companies like to measure email name acquisition. That's part of their nurture process, and so it's a very important metric. Some companies are better than others about carrying the conversion rates all the way through from marketing to sales. And so, as we get into deeper integrations with our sales CRM, we might look at content's impact on days to close. Can we compress that schedule and close a deal more quickly by putting the right content in front of the right person at the right time? We can look at, look at impact on average or annual contract size, or annual contract value. Some terminology is used there in the SaaS world, or even customer lifetime value if you have those metrics. These sort of build in an escalating manner, if you will. So, like I said, commit to the ones that you can, that you can track, and err on the simplicity of brevity, or err on the side of simplicity and brevity when you're building your metrics dashboards. Again, you need to have a few points that your team and your business can rally around, and not get super detailed about analysis paralysis, because it will prevent you from moving forward. I would also make sure that we do something with our metrics, that we're finding those little gems, and we repeat the winning content and the winning campaigns and activities. And also, at the same time, give ourselves permission to stop doing any work that's ineffective. I've found people inside of organizations sometimes continue doing work because they think it's important, until we find out, wow, that's ineffective. Let's stop doing that and put our energy to something that's much more effective. So now I'd like for Jake, if you could show us a customer example of how DAM can help with content metrics.
Yeah, when it comes to evaluation, our insights content analytics can be a huge help in tracking content metrics. And we've gotten some great examples from customers, but I know SeaWorld is one that's done a good job with that. So here are some things to explore as you connect DAM with other content metrics and tools that you're using for that. You definitely want to tie content analytics into other business analytics, and that's not always by integration, but think about that as a process, and be sure that you're tracking meaning in content analytics to the things that move the needle for your business. You may look to integrate your content marketing and business intelligence tools so that you have that unified set of analytics. You definitely want to track the DAM metrics for usage, repurposing, and engagement measures that can show valuable content and help you create more of the best stuff and not so much of the underperforming content. And definitely leverage insights to understand top content and what actions have come as a result of that. And this is a real big trend, only expected to increase. And we'll see more linkages of web and content analytics into business intelligence tools in the years to come. All right, back to Peg. All right.
Oh, sorry. Now we're in the optimized phase of the content lifecycle as we move through the 5 steps that we showed you early on. So we've moved through the execution and evaluation of the metrics. It's really time to optimize what we're doing. This is really taking the knowledge that you're gaining, those metrics, the execution knowledge that you're gaining, and you find a faster path to success. It's time to start running at scale. So if you're thinking about crawl, walk, run, we're quickly walking, or we're starting to have a jog at this point. It's time to increase the volume or the frequency of the team, your team's content commitments. And as we get better at upcycling our current content and choosing the best performing assets and exploiting those through omni-channel exposure, you're going to find that this is much more easy to create more efficiently, and you're not having to start from scratch. So you're actually running at scale without having it feel like it's more work. And in some cases it may actually feel like less work, but you're having a larger impact upon your prospect and customers and your organization in general. This is a good time also to think about experimenting with maybe more higher level persona-based content. So maybe we had just done a few assets up to this point, but now we're learning more about what is starting to perform. So again, I would encourage you take that crawl, walk, run approach, and when you start getting to this point of running at scale and with deeper segmentation, you're going to find some really solid paybacks here. And of course, don't forget to remember to use your DAM to help make this easier. This is where all that metadata discipline that you set up early in the process is going to have big paybacks for you as you're better able to attribute content to personas and understand really how to take it to that next level. So moving into the next slide, we're going to have Jake talk about some drivers for this.
Yeah, now that we've talked a little bit about strategy and people and process, let's talk a bit about technology and tools with some of the key drivers for why you're looking at content solutions such as digital asset management or how you're looking to optimize your use of DAM. And you definitely want to choose processes and tools that fulfill your business drivers. It's wise to document your drivers so that you don't lose sight of what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. And these drivers can include the ability to enable collaboration among your teams and your partners so that you're not operating in silos, you're working together. With that, you definitely want to have this central repository of all content. And remember to consider finished content and also your sourced images, files, videos, and the things that should be linked and collected together, as well as managing archives. You want to make it easier to collaborate, reuse, upcycle, and share content across teams and audiences by having this central source and means to collaborate easily. And of course, offering that appropriate access to control access to your different inventories of content is really key for your governance. You want to establish some status tracking, workflows and mechanisms, as well as using version control to ensure that you're always working with the most current content assets. And then work to get an overall view, as well as some drill down reports of content at all stages to evaluate performance at a content asset level. And that can be a very meaningful application of metadata and reporting. So these are just some of the things to look for in digital asset management and content technology. Maybe you have access to this today, maybe you don't. But it's something that we'd love to talk with you more about by applying DAM in this way. All right, back to Peg.
Right, and along that vein, when you're in this optimized state and you're finding that those processes you've been doing manually, maybe it's time to start thinking about a technology solution to manage those processes. Yeah, I just really want to share some of the findings that I've seen across hundreds of marketers that I've helped roll out content technology platforms. I really noticed there are just some pitfalls that we can help avoid when we're rolling out a content technology or really any MarTech technology, honestly. Be really careful about not asking your team to change too much too soon with regard to their processes and their workloads. We're all very busy these days, so strive to adopt tools that make your team's life easier, not add more work to the day. Keep it super simple as you can, so that people will help, will adopt the technology that you're trying to implement, and it should provide little pain, and in fact, it should help ease their pain versus add to it. Be sure that you know when you're rolling out a technology, when you're debuting it, when you're training people, be sure to understand the WIFM. That's just that basic good old what's in it for me, and really understanding that personal payoff for the users. Maybe it's better reporting, maybe they can have better workload tracking, maybe they have a better ability to see what content they've produced against what personas. Whatever it is, just really understand that payoff by the individual user and types of users so that you can appeal to them on a very personal level, and you'll get quicker adoption of the technology. I also, as you're doing your evaluation of tools, I also recommend that you look for very easy to use tools that don't require a ton of administration. Sure, there's some setup with any tool to get started, and and bulk uploading or whatever of content and assets and getting that going, but what I just want to encourage is that we don't stay stuck in the mechanics of the tool. We don't even want people to become experts at a tool. We want it to become invisible to our team so that it just enables them to be better at their job. I don't care how good they are at the tool. I want them to be really good at their job, and the tool simply enables that behind the scenes. And then last but not least, the other important thing to think about is people who buy and evaluate and make technology decisions are not always the people using it. So the needs of someone in that buying decision process, like, sure, if I'm the leader of my marketing department and I've implemented this tool, that's a very different need than the person who day to day is being asked to do their job or parts of their job inside of this tool. So just really be cognizant of that as you roll out new platforms throughout any team. So wow, take a big breath here. We've covered a ton today. Hopefully you've found some practical tips that you can implement right away. And we'd love if you have some specific questions to answer those. So I'm actually going to hand this back to Jake to help moderate the Q&A part of the session, tell you how you can pose questions and we'll answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Peg, and thanks, everyone. We have covered a lot today and definitely have a little time for any questions that you may have here today. And you can send those through the GoToWebinar chat panel for questions. We've been watching those as they come in. And be sure to ask any questions of Peg or of myself about content strategy or digital asset management. Give a few moments for anybody else to gather questions as you think on this. I think I'll kick us off, Peg, with one very key question. You know, as we do this webinar here today, many people will think about how do we get started? And let's each answer the question, what's the one thing that you can do tomorrow with applying some of the learnings today and really these philosophies for content strategy?
Right, so that's a good question, Jake, and I may surprise the audience. My recommendation is that tomorrow you stop creating content, which I know you may think on the surface goes against what I've been saying all day today, but my point in that is it goes back to what I said earlier, that all organizations have content in some form and in some place that already exists. And I would encourage you to really take stock and inventory of what you have before you go off on a tangent creating a ton of new content to fulfill a strategy. You may already have 60% of that created at this point. You just didn't realize it, or this other team created it and we didn't realize it over here. So that would be my big piece of advice. If you do one thing tomorrow, I would say put your team on a content hiatus and let's take a quick, let's take inventory of what we have currently. So how about you, Jake?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So it's a big one. It's a good one to think about. I guess I encourage the whole audience to think about that. But if I were to answer that, I would probably answer it very similarly. I mentioned the content audits, and I would say that's very important to developing content strategy so that you're optimizing the work that you have and the work that you're capable of. And we actually went through that here this year. We did a content audit, but it wasn't just a content audit. What we did was basically looked at our entire customer life cycle and looked at all of our common customer touch points across and identify all of the content that makes up that journey. And that was really key to identifying areas of overlap and areas that we can increase efficiency as well as the gaps. Our UX director, Libby, she loves to say that the world's problems can be solved with design sprints and journey mapping. And I believe her in that. And so that comes by mapping out the journey for your customers and then focusing on what do you have and then applying design thinking to make improvements. And that can be done with content strategy, and that can be done with software. And I encourage you to talk with Libby more about that. I guess at this point, I asked the same question of those of you on the webinar. What's the one thing that you would do tomorrow if you can dedicate tomorrow to applying anything from today? Feel free to chat those in through the GoToWebinar panel if you have an answer to that. We do have one. Well, thank you. Develop a plan, and that's really key. Not only developing a plan, but documenting that plan, sharing it with your team, making it visible, and constantly revisiting that. And not constant as in revisiting it daily, but making it accessible for people to go to it when they need it, and then revisit it as often as it needs to change, adjust, and iterate. Got another one? Much like Peg and I answered, finding out what you have and where it is, very important. I think our data here is pointing to it. It's necessary to go through how to effectively do a content audit. That could be a future topic, and we'll look to do that here with a web workshop in the future. Oh, another one. I know it's a struggle with many Widen customers and those that are not Widen customers, but it's really getting to that dream world of a central source of truth. Not only just a technology solution that is one place where people can go, but really one source for process and all people and teams to say that this is our dam or this is our content hub, and finding consistency across the organization in how people refer and rely upon that content hub. And one more ad, do some cleansing. I equate that to cleaning out our closets. It's good to do that with every change in season. Do some cleansing. That's important to know. By decluttering your dam or your content libraries, you stand to find, offer, and utilize the best stuff that you have across your teams. Well, thank you for those of you that have chatted in. If you have any other questions, you can let us know. If we don't get to you here during the webinar, we will be sure to follow up with you individually this afternoon. And if you want to continue any conversations more one-on-one, we invite you to talk with me. If you want to see how digital asset management software and other processes can assist with your content strategy, you can talk to us, contact us to talk to us more, talk to a Widen advisor. And if you want to talk with Peg to further explore the topics of content strategy within your overall marketing strategy, you can feel free to reach out to Peg at the B2B Marketing Academy, Peg at b2bmarketingacademy.com. Peg, any last words?
Oh, I just want to say thank you all for listening today and for the great chat conversations. It sounds like I know what a lot of us are going to be doing over the next few weeks. So thanks for your time, and I'd love to hear from any of you through email or Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you, Peg, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.